Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where I talk about healing, human connection, and how positive intelligence can empower you no matter where you are on your growth journey. I'm your host, Nakiya, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about my experience in a PQ pod with 3 other coaches. There were pros and cons to the way that I participated in my pod. And after deciding that I wanted to use positive intelligence as the framework in my coaching practice, I learned from the cons of my experience and leaned into the pros. So my hope is that when you join my Better Together group coaching program, you will have an even better experience than I did, even though I did have a great experience. I started the original PQ program in the spring of 2024, not knowing what a profound impact on my life that it would have. I was taking coaching classes on the weekends and had volunteered in class a couple of times, which had apparently gotten me noticed. And just before the end of my last course, a classmate asked me if I might be interested in continuing my coaching education by participating in this PQ pod. I didn't know what it was, but he sent me a link to a 45-minute video outlining the program. It left me with more questions than answers, but I was definitely intrigued and all about adding more tools to my coaching tool belt. So I said yes. I joined the pod with 3 men. I will give them generic names to protect their identities. We'll call them Jeff, Ben, and Tim. Jeff was the original person who knew about the program and got the whole thing started. He was far further along on his healing journey and had a solid meditation practice for years. I appreciated his insights and his gentle nature. He had warm grandpa vibes, is what I would describe it as. Ben was closer to my age, and he had a similar passion for helping people as I did. You could just read it on him like a book. He had a good heart and he cared deeply about his family and was focused on a coaching business aimed at men dealing with grief and depression. And then Tim was technically part of the pod, but the reality was that he half participated at best. He was trying to sell his house and advance his already existing coaching business at the same time as agreeing to this program. While I have no ill will towards him, he taught me some very important lessons about the importance of each pod member's commitment to the program so that everyone in the pod could have the best possible experience. The program was presented to us in such a way that we could choose to have a single person lead the pod meeting each week, or it could be a rotating responsibility. Even though Jeff had gotten us all together, he did not want to lead every week, so he suggested that the responsibility rotate each week, and everyone agreed. My Better Together program includes what I call PQ 2.0, but the pod I was in the original version of the PQ program. New content was released each Saturday morning then, but now it gets released on Fridays, and everyone was expected to watch the content on Saturday, and then we would have our pod meeting on Sunday mornings. We did have a backup time of Monday evenings if there was any reason that Sunday morning wasn't going to work for someone on the pod, and we utilized that option twice. The daily focus and program content switched each Tuesday at that point. It now switches on Mondays, which I much prefer. The program was 6 weeks with one additional week to check out daily focus options after the core content had been taught. There were a ton of pros and a handful of cons to my experience in the pod. So let's run through those. Positives first, because that's how I like to align my life in general. This is going to feel obvious, but the core content itself is the greatest pro of all. I believe that I would have found deep and meaningful connection with this PQ operating system no matter how it was delivered to me personally. The science behind it is that rock solid. The spacing of the content as it was delivered was also a huge pro. Even though it was a lot of information to digest in 6 weeks, What was offered each week was definitely small enough to learn how to integrate that concept and then build on it the following week. The next positive is the app. The ease of use of it, the perfectly timed delivery of the content, the constant reminders to be both realistic and kind to yourself throughout the process, and the habit forming that feels natural when delivered as perfectly timed, focused reminders. The pod discussions was such a pro. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, there is something magical that happens when you say things out loud instead of just thinking about them. Talking about the concepts that we learned the day before really helped me lock them in. I was also figuring out that I had ADHD around this time. So even though I didn't know it then, the weekly cadence was also helping me stay focused. I recommitted to my why each and every week by showing up to the pod discussion, even when I wasn't quote unquote feeling like it. Another pro is just the speed at which I saw very real results and impact on my life. It felt almost instantaneous. Even though I was a little frustrated at the start that it wouldn't let me skip ahead and continue learning, I later came to appreciate that fact. It helped me spend more time on things that felt too easy at the time, like PQ reps. I would later learn that it felt too easy on purpose. I was building my mental muscles in the easy times so that it would make it possible at all during the hard times. Walk before you run, sort of thing, right? I saw results in my relationship with my partner within a couple of weeks, and then at work a short while after that. I can also say now, a year and a half later, that what I had learned after 6 weeks, while it was life changingly transformative, it was just the beginning. Even after having such a positive experience with it, I had no idea how I would be able to embody the operating system. I now experience life through the lens of the PQ operating system, and I lead with empathy first and foremost. So, that is a whole lot of good stuff. But I believe in full transparency, so we will cover some of the challenges that I had too. Not having a singular leader of the pod had its challenges. Before beginning the program, we were all asked to sign a letter of commitment to the 6 weeks program. When Tim decided to not follow through with that commitment, it frustrated me, and there was nothing that I could do about it. Tim no-showed to more than one pod discussion and didn't watch the content before at least two others. Another part of the commitment was daily check-ins with your pod. Tim wanted to use WhatsApp, even though nobody else in the group was using it. And then Tim was the one who rarely checked in. Again, frustrated. While Ben tried to delicately bring the subject up with Jeff, Jeff didn't want to call Tim out because he knew the stress he was under trying to sell his house. His top saboteur was the pleaser, and it was out in full force when it came to Tim. I had basically written Tim off by about halfway through, even though we were all still pretending that everything was fine. The program content was great, but it was fairly generic and offered very few real life examples. I understood why it was made this way. It is used across the globe with people with all sorts of different cultural backgrounds. I'll also add that all of the content was delivered by Shazad himself. While I don't mind his voice, not everyone loved it. I was excited to hear that one of their updates is going to be offering the content via several voices. The duration of the program was 6 weeks, which is great from an initial buy-in perspective, but not great for long-term implementation. While it was good to learn all of the content in a relatively short time, it felt more like a boot camp where people would just give up on it after the 6 weeks instead of realizing that that was just the first step and that this practice is about a lifetime commitment that doesn't have to be done perfectly, just consistently. After only 6 weeks, many people hadn't fully kicked their perfectionist or stickler saboteur to the curb, so they still wanted to give up just because they had a bad couple of days. The key is just to go back to it. There's no guilt to be had. Just start again with your PQ reps, one small step at a time. The turnaround time between when content was released and when we would meet made having a social life on the weekends challenging at best. Yeah, it's only an hour or so of content, but if you're really doing the work, you will likely need to set aside 2 to 3 hours to fully embody the content and explore all of its meanings to you individually. I was super excited to see this change in the 2.0 version, where content now comes out Friday morning. Not having an experienced coach to guide us definitely felt like a miss. While it was great to go through the program with fellow coaches, I definitely felt like I could have had an even better experience had it been led by someone who had already gone through the program, someone that I could ask real questions to. Pre-recorded episodes from Shazad was great, and there was a community in the app that we could ask questions to, but that's not quite the same as having that person in the pod discussion with you. We definitely had moments of feeling like it was the blind leading the blind, but we were doing our best. Having quote unquote random podmates with only a single shared interest, coaching, was a miss for sure. I appreciate that this happened though, because it showed me the importance of targeting the right people and the art of building a great pod. Even with nearly nothing else in common with these three men, each of us were able to feel seen by sharing our similar struggles with habit building, relationship conflicts, and general life stress. We quickly built psychological safety to feel safe enough to share parts of our own origin stories that led to our saboteurs and solidify the value of the program. What I realized very quickly, though, was that these connections could be monumentally stronger if we had even more in common. I was the only queer person in my pod and the only woman. Those two things alone make for a hugely different lived experience than straight men, and that is why I consider the whole person when building pods for the Better Together program. I also strongly believe that there is a much greater likelihood of those relationships continuing on after the program is finished if podmates are able to relate to each other on more levels. I think it's super important to have at least one other person that you can continue to talk to about how you continue to evolve in your mastery of the PQ operating system and integrate it in small and large ways in all aspects of your life. This was foundational in my choice to make the Better Together program 3 months. It naturally strengthens those connections with podmates and encourages most people to continue those relationships well beyond the program finish. At the end of the day, with all of the pros and all of the cons, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was the framework that I wanted to utilize in all of my coaching practices because it cuts through all of the noise and gets to the root of whatever the issue is. The analogy that I use is that most coaching frameworks operate like modern day medicine, throwing drugs at the symptoms but not getting to the cause of the issue in the first place. PQ coaching is like the holistic healing that looks at a whole person, takes their entire lived experience into account before offering an operating system, not an answer, so that it can be applied for the remainder of your life without the constant need for more of the drug of modern day medicine. As of the time of recording this, I have been living my life with this operating system in the front seat for a year and a half, and I nearly cannot recognize my life before it. I have grown and changed in so many amazing ways, and I cannot wait to see what each new day brings me. That brings us to the end of this Better Together episode. I hope you enjoyed learning about my experience in a PQ pod. Be sure to tune in every other week for new episodes. The next episode will be about my experience coming out as polyamorous, and you won't want to miss it. Don't forget to follow Belief and Balance Coaching on TikTok. And if you like this episode, be sure to like, follow, and share. If you're interested in coaching services, check out beliefandbalancecoaching.com. And until next time, keep loving yourself and leading with empathy.